Welcome to the second Chapter 13 lecture video on conflict and negotiations. Let's get right into it. With power often comes conflict, so we need to spend some time talking about common types of conflict and conflict resolution methods leaders deal with often. Conflict arises from clashing differences in an area or context where people care about the outcome. And these differences could resolve around differing perceptions, differing goals, or even differing values. Conflict is almost always the result of opposition or incompatibility, and it is a very natural part of the workplace. While we often think of conflict as being negative, conflict can be helpful in promoting change at the individual, group, and organizational level, assuming effective conflict resolution occurs. And importantly, conflict can be task focused, having to deal with the content or requirements of the job. It can be relationship focused, having to do with the social relationships and interactions we have with others. Or the conflict can be process focused, having to do with the process by which some event or outcome happened. And there's three common sources of conflict in the workplace, which include unclear or uncertain roles and responsibilities, limited resources, and conflicting interests. I want to highlight this again. You've got unclear or uncertain roles and responsibilities, the existence of limited resources, and then conflicting interests. Conflict comes in two forms. Functional conflict is a healthy and constructive disagreement that supports the goals of the larger group, improves the overall group, and results in a win-win outcome during conflict resolution. The other form of conflict is dysfunctional conflict, which is an unhealthy and destructive disagreement that only supports the goals of the individual. And because it is self-serving, it tends to reduce overall group performance, resulting in a win-lose goal when trying to be resolved, such that each person wants themselves to win and they want the other person to lose. And when we speak about dysfunctional conflict, the types of behaviors that occur change based on the level of the conflict. So, for example, at low levels of dysfunctional conflict, people in a dysfunctional conflict situation become apathetic and non-responsive, so they just don't care. Whereas at high levels of dysfunctional conflict, employees become disruptive and uncooperative. Think of your own experiences of dysfunctional conflict. Odds are, in situations where the conflict was minor, you simply said to yourself, it isn't worth my time, or it isn't worth responding. That is that apathetic response. However, when the conflict was high, you likely voiced your concerns and became uncooperative with the other party with whom you were in conflict. And this highlights how the level of conflict changes based on how dysfunctional conflicts manifest and how strong it is. And when we discuss conflict, there are three loci or locuses worth noting. Conflict can be intra-group when the conflict is happening between people in the same group or team. For example, if part of that green team had conflict with another green team member, it's happening within the same team. It's intra, I-N-T-R-A. Conflict can also be intergroup when the conflict is happening between people of different groups or teams. For example, if the green team was in conflict with the blue team, it's intergroup. It's happening between different groups. So I-N-T-E-R. Don't get the intra and the inter confused. And lastly, conflict can be dyadic when it occurs between two people, also known as a dyad. For example, if one person from the green group was in conflict with one person from the blue group, this would be dyadic intergroup conflict. And then if two people in the same group were in conflict with one another, that would be dyadic intragroup conflict. So dyad refers to two people. The inter versus the intra deals with whether or not it's happening within the same group or with different groups. With power comes the ability to resolve conflict in the workplace, and there are 5 common styles of conflict resolution. One option is avoiding or withdrawing or suppressing from the conflict, and avoiding is a lose-lose situation as neither party benefits from the withdrawal. Another option is competing by seeking out personal interest over those of the other person. In this resolution style is a win-lose as one party benefits while the other doesn't. Accommodating is another option, which occurs when you appease an opponent just to satisfy and maintain the relationship. And accommodating is a win-lose situation as the accommodating party loses, but the other party wins. Another option is compromising or accepting a solution with incomplete satisfaction. And because neither party is satisfied nor dissatisfied, there is no winner or loser. And lastly, another option is collaborating or cooperating and searching for mutually beneficial outcomes. And collaborating is the only win-win resolution type. I do want to highlight that each style ranges in assertiveness and cooperativeness, so take a second to review the figure on the bottom of the screen. And for a funny example of bad conflict resolution, feel free to review this following clip from The Office. One of the keys to minimizing conflict is recognizing when there really is a disagreement. Many apparent conflicts are due to people using different language to discuss the same general course of action. When resolving conflict, you must encourage open, frank discussions based on differences in interests rather than differences in issues. The most disruptive conflicts are those that are never addressed directly. And you need to emphasize shared interests or how each person can benefit from the resolution of the conflict. There is perhaps no better place for leaders to use their power, influence, political capabilities, and resolution skills than during negotiations. So, negotiation, aka bargaining, is the process in which two or more parties exchange goods or services and attempt to agree on the exchange rate for them. Linked are a few funny videos of negotiation from pop culture and TV and films. Take a few seconds and review these for a break from this lecture video. With distributive bargaining, parties seek out to divide up a finite amount of resources, which leads to fighting for what's on the table or some piece of the pie, so to speak. In distributive bargaining, there is a fixed amount, so when resources are distributed to one person, that implies a loss of that resources for the other people. With distributive bargaining, the outcome is win-lose, as the person who gets the resources wins while everyone else loses. And because there is a limited number of resources, employees are motivated by their own individual gain, leading to opposing interests and goals. And the best thing to do is to make the first offer or provide a deadline when using distributive bargaining. Take a second to think about why this would be. When you make the first offer, you are providing the anchor, the standard, or the reference point for the rest of the negotiation, and this gives you power. So think of this as your anchoring bias that we discussed in the decision-making bias chapter. With integrative negotiation, on the other hand, parties are seeking one or more settlements by considering the most valuable needs of each party. That is, they consider what is most and least important to each person, and because everyone's needs are considered and ranked, so to speak, the outcome is a win-win. Furthermore, in an integrative negotiation, employees are motivated by individual and joint gains, so each party wants themselves and the other party to be happy. Additionally, with integrative negotiations, the interests are different but can be integrated to be beneficial for everyone. And integrative negotiations promote trading to ensure each party gets their greatest needs or desires. So, in essence, you trade something of little value to you, but that satisfies the other party for something of little value to them that satisfies you. And whereas the goal with distributive bargaining is to get as much of the pie as possible, with integrative bargaining, the goal is to expand the pie or resources until everyone is satisfied. Regardless of whether distributive or integrative bargaining is happening, the process of negotiation is almost always the same. In step one, you prepare and plan, or you do your homework. By defining the ground rules of who, what, where, when, and how of the negotiation process, you want to understand who will be negotiating, where the negotiation will take place, what time the constraints are, what the procedures are, etc. At this stage, you also want to understand the nature of the conflict, the history leading up to the conflict, and the desires of each party, among other things. You also need to develop a strategy and a range of possible goals and outcomes. So you want to decide what is minimally acceptable for you. Then in step two, you exchange information and clarify and justify demands as needed. So you provide all the information and then you explain, clarify, amplify, bolster, justify the original demands as needed. Then in step three, the bargaining and problem solving happen. This is the stage where you actually have the give and take between parties, where parties need to make concessions and come to an agreement. And this is the essence of the negotiation process. And lastly, once an agreement has been formed, step four happens, which includes the closure and implementation of the negotiated terms and conditions. At this point, you formalize the final agreement and develop procedures to implement and monitor the decisions, which can come in the form of like formal paperwork or even informal gestures like a handshake. And there are several factors that influence how effectively individuals negotiate. As we will go through these, make sure you note who is better or worse at negotiation. So, for starters, personality and individual differences impact negotiation. Employees high in agreeableness tend to be poor negotiators, whereas those high in extroversion are better negotiators. Employees high in self-efficacy and intelligence are also better negotiators. Mood also impacts the effectiveness of negotiations. Interestingly, genuine anger makes negotiation less effective, but surface anger can make it more effective. And the reason for this is that real anger often hinders your decision making. If you're really mad and you're really aggravated, you tend to feel a little flustered, you're not making rational decisions. But when the anger is faked, it can initiate a quicker resolution style without the loss of the decision-making capabilities. So the person feels the pressure of the anger without it being that true innate anger that can lead to those decision-making problems. Strategic disappointment also makes negotiation more effective. For example, if someone offers you a subpar offer, you can sigh, you can shrug your shoulders, implying your dissatisfaction with the offer without any verbal communication. And this is a strategic means of providing information without explicitly providing verbal information. The other party recognizes your disappointment without you having to explain or utilize any informational resources. Now, anxiety, on the other hand, reduces the effectiveness of negotiation since anxiety is often present in how we act and speak. The other party can perceive anxiety, putting the anxious person at a disadvantage. There also exist gender differences in negotiations. On average, men are more likely to initiate negotiations. In fact, a recent study shows that 54% of men automatically negotiate their salary, whereas only 30% of women do. Men tend to also behave more assertively and confidently during negotiations, and men tend to receive more favorable outcomes. So women negotiate less and they behave more timidly when they do on average, which leads to less favorable negotiation outcomes. All of these gender differences stem from stereotypes regarding how women should behave versus men. So for males in the class, keep doing what society prescribes you to do, and for the ladies, disregard those stereotypes and make reasonable demands. If you don't ask, you won't receive. So, my advice to you is this: the effectiveness of negotiation is highly dependent on your reputation, your network, and general trust. So, before bargaining, try to develop a strong social network and a positive reputation reflecting competency, integrity, and trustworthiness. And remember, repeated negotiations are built on trust and accountability, so stay true to your work and accountable for your actions. As always, email me at samantha.jordan@unt.edu if you have any questions or concerns.